Yeah. I guess you can hear me. So, did you have any problems with last class? Like, what's your like? I don't know if somebody has like a crucial thing that he doesn't get it or something. No? Like,
I had a question, Yunus.
yeah.
I was just reading some materials and some blogs to just get familiarized with the concepts, and I just had a doubt. I saw that React is nothing but whatever we want in our screen.
Yes.
We are trying to split it into components.
Yes. I was trying to emphasize that last time. React is nothing but a way to display stuff like like DOM on the DOM.
Yeah, so for example, let's assume a simple thing like a to-do list that we already did, but let's assume it has more components, more to it. So
Yeah.
for example, when I see that to-do list and I decide that there are only three components, and you see the list and you decide that that can be four components. So how can I be sure how much it should be? Like, how can I be sure that I'm right?
Yeah, well, this is you cannot be sure. Nobody can be sure. This is not a problem you can validate. This is like saying, should I write three functions or two functions? Should I write four functions? It depends. It depends on the context. This is like a programming problem more than React problem. Like how much you
Okay.
define. Should you have like a function, like as I said, like the functions example. So as long as like something feels good in terms of like how you can edit it, how you can read it, and also other people can read it, it's fine. You should not strive for like crazy, like perfect.
Okay.
There is no perfect design, honestly. There
Okay.
is
Yeah.
better.
Okay.
There is better, and you learn better by experience, by doing code reviews, by people seeing your code, by reading. You always get better, but there is no like
Yeah.
right and wrong. No.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there are a few things that you can remember when you're writing code, and it's not valid just for React. It's for any program you're writing, such as like make your functions smaller and make that your functions do as less thing as possible, so it's easier for someone to understand what that function does. And if you think about React, it's basically especially when you're working with function components, you can think of your components as functions, and if you think that you can make it to have less responsibles and maybe split responsibilities to other components, that's a good thing because you can have like smaller functions, smaller files. So for other people, which is going to code on that same file, will be easier to understand. But that's something you're gonna get the feeling with the time. So
Okay.
yeah.
Cool.
I also ask a question.
Yeah.
Uh, I try to modulate the code so that, for example, I needed to have different functions. For example, one for making the font strong, and one for example, putting different parts of a sentence together and make a paragraph out of that, and then also a function to combine different paragraphs and make a text box. And one of the mentors mentioned that maybe I should put, instead of making functions, put all the features like a strong and then paragraph and all these things in the main code. And I was thinking that maybe we just want every function to do just one task, and then the more we go in higher layers, the more complicated the functions would get. But they just use these child functions. Have I misunderstood the discipline or the kind of the good practice?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I kind of get your question, but can you just like sort of re-ask it again? Maybe Fernando get it better than me. I'm not sure, but if you can just like ask it in a shorter sort of like, what's the direct question?
Maybe I should share my screen and show you the code that I had. I don't know if it would be easier.
Like try to abstract the question. Try to like to think about it. Like just try to explain it to somebody who.
Yeah, for example, I wanted for this to-do list, I wanted the title of the task and the deadline to be strong, and I made a different function for for making that part of the text
Okay.
bold or making it strong. but the mentor said that instead of making a separate function, you should do this in the part of the main code, and you wouldn't send the things to the function.
I got you actually. Yeah, makes sense. I will say my part, and Fernando maybe can also say his part. Honestly, like there is some standard, as Fernando said, how code can be better or wrong, but overall, it's so difficult to define them like exactly based on numbers. So, like, of course, like splitting code is really good, but also like going to like the people who prefers like one line function, a function can only have one line. That's also a bit crazy. So it's some people really like that. Some people will advocate and say function should only do one thing and it should be one line, and if it's two lines, it should be splitted. But I think I really go by sort of by heart, by simplicity. Is this function simple enough to be understood, and does it do only one thing? Does it do one thing, like logically speaking? Does it take something and return something and just do one thing with it? Yeah, even if it's 10 lines, 15 lines, I'm fine. But sometimes even a function that is 3 lines and it's really complex, I would split it up. So I really go by feeling, like it's a gut feeling more than a thing. So I am against the people who says you should put everything in one thing, and I'm against people who says you should split everything into one-line functions. I would say it's a per case, and what decide the case is really how complex the function it is and how difficult it is to be understood and to be sort of changed. That's my 2 cents. I don't know what Fernando can say.
I agree what you're saying, and one thing to remember is that you can always change your code. So you can write everything in a function, and then you realize, oh, this could be in another function, or this could be in another, so you can change later. So your code doesn't need to be perfect from the beginning. You can always change later.
Exactly.
Thank you. So there's more or less some kind of gray zone that you can play in that area.
Yeah, don't overthink too much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, don't. Take advices, but just consider them. They are not like dictated. Like, any more questions? No. So I assume you got the concepts of last class in really good manner. Cool. Today we will be focusing mainly on 2 things. Primarily, we will try to focus on 2 things. One thing called state and one thing called life cycle. They maybe they sound like scary names, but they are not. They are like simple things. Well, I assume they are simple. Maybe they're not. They are. They are. So yeah, we will start actually by just talking about like these 2 concepts and visualizing them and understanding like why we need them, and maybe just start by doing an example, and from that example we can take it far. Maybe Fernando, if you can, for example, give us an idea, like if you want to explain state, like because like I personally like state wasn't something that it is something there. It's like it's the elephant in the room. It's there, like even before React. But we didn't really name it, and we didn't really sort of give it a context. But now it's like all over the place. State management, state, manage your state. Like, how can you be like explain that, or like?
I agree. Well, it's hard to say because there's many overlaps of stuff going on with state. So state basically means somehow it's the stored data that you're going to use for your application. But this stored data can be either some data you got from an external service, or it can also represent the state of a component, such as like you have a form where you have the different states, like the values which are inside your fields. And all of this is state because it's the data your application is holding for it to make sense to the user. So it's all that data that you need to have in order to make your application work, I guess. I don't know if it's simple enough, but it's how it came to my mind right now.
Okay. That's interesting. The way I think about state is like in transitions. That's how I model it. For example, if you think about your life, you are sort of like in a state at like in each moment you are in a state. What I mean by you are in a state, your behavior is defined by something. Maybe you are sad, maybe you are happy, Also, like you will pass something, you will sleep, you will wake up. It means that your behavior is changing, and you are currently like you remember that you are sad, like you know that now you are sad. It's not that you think you are sad and it will disappear. No, it's here, like you are sad or you are super happy. So there is like a piece of information that holds what's inside your mind now. I don't know if that makes sense. And that thing, we call it state. And that thing passes by a lot of transformations. As you are living the day, there's a lot of event that happens. You hear this, you do this, you do that, and that affects the state internally inside you. So there's like an internal state, an internal status inside you that's switched on and off and changes and balances between like all the different things. And this is basically state. And if we really sort of think about it in a web application manner, like what state means. For example, you are browsing in Facebook, and I don't know, like well, let's say YouTube. I think YouTube is more frequent app than actually Facebook. So many people they don't like Facebook anymore, but I like Facebook. But if we think about YouTube, for example, once you click on a video, the UI shows you the video. What does it mean? That means that the UI is like you. It's holding a state. The UI knows that you are watching a video. The video will not just disappear. And why you are watching a video? Because you clicked on a video. So something caused the state of the YouTube app to change from a list of videos into a YouTube video. And that's the same thing as you, because you are living, you hold a state inside yourself. Maybe you are happy, maybe you are sad. And once you do an action or you receive an action, you change based on that. And this is like all over web applications. When you have a list of things, you add one item, the state changed. You had 4 items, now you have 5 items, and you have 6, and you can delete one. So this is like what I mean by state. It's like the state of what's inside your application now. It's the same way as a thing. And surprisingly, in React, state is really one of the most important topics. And React really embraced the state concept. And you will see, we will, for example, go into examples and do that. You will see that how it's called, each component can have its own state. Each component can hold state. We will see how we will define it and how we'll sort of manipulate state, because the whole idea about state, as we said, is that something does change. And when does it change? It will reflect. So when your emotional state change, it will reflect on you. When you sleep, that will reflect on you. Every time you change, that will reflect on you. And the same thing in YouTube. Every time you click a video, that will reflect on the UI. So every action has a state change that will reflect some changes. I don't know if that sort of makes sense on an abstract level. Of course, that's not practical.
I have a question.
Yes.
I mean, just a comparison. Can we imagine this as a big house with rooms, and whenever you remove some furniture, you change the state of each of the components? Is that something that makes sense? Because I'm really trying to make it very, very simple.
I think so. I think that kind of makes sense, because your house has a state, and you are doing actions to change the state of a house and transitioning its state to a different state. The sofa is on the left, the sofa is on the right. So each period of time, you can see that the house has a specific version or specific view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I
I'll send you soundtrack.
can I call it like simply just presence of something? Just presence, or it can be anything. I can pass it from anywhere, whatever, but it's just presence of something inside that particular component, which can, I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
your present. Like you are holding what's happening to you right now.
Yeah, okay.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
When I was looking at the different code, you have state and you have life cycle.
Yeah.
And then I got a little bit confused because state is something that also you say is a stored data. It's
Yes.
something the user can provide to the website. Like for example, when you get a formulario, a form, and the user send the data, and the form takes it and process it, is that state?
So state passes by different lifetimes, life cycle. State, like not React life cycle, but the state, like my life cycle, your life cycle. There's a life cycle to everything. State also has a life cycle. For example, in Facebook, you are looking at the messages and you can add the message, delete a message or something. But the initial list of messages, where it's coming from? It's coming from the server. The server, like they have a server that provides you with the messages. They are stored in a database, it's provided. So initializing the state comes from the thing. The user can type a message and click enter, and that message will be added to the list of messages. So state is not something that it's so the component itself decide if the state is accessible, not accessible, can the user add it, can the user not add it. It's the component's decision. But definitely yes, most of our state is actually affected by the user doing action. A user filling a form, a user submitting a message, a user clicking on a YouTube, a user dragging the YouTube wheel to go to the middle of the video. That's sort of causes state transformation. You add a friend on Facebook, that changes the state from like not friend yet to requesting friendship.
Yeah, that's so. Then, for example, in my to-do list, I use a state to have a box where you can add a new to-do, right?
Yeah.
And then when you press the button, like it is storage and everything, so it remembers you have this new function. So for that, it's a state.
Exactly. It's a way to remember how we came to this, our present.
Can I have more than one state in a component?
No. Each component can only have one state, but the tricky part is one state is an object, and an object can hold any amount of information.
Okay, just one thing that I think I saw the Lucha homework, and she used a hook. So things are a bit different, right? When we use hook, then instead when you use a class component. So in this class, we'll be using a class component, and the state, it's one object, as Jon said. But you see that when you use hooks, this is probably something for later, you can have multiple states, but they are all part of the same component. So they all going to reflect in the state of the component. So
that makes sense.
Yeah, they hold different values, but they all reflect the state of that component.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yes, but yeah, as we said, it's an object, and object can hold anything. Remember this. So you're not limited to one. You are limited to one, but technically not one. Does that make sense? Like, of course, on like this is not coding. This is just like ideas level. Just wanted to discuss. Yeah, cool. So maybe we can start by coding a bit. Show me some code, and take an example and take it and stretch it from there. Do you agree?
Yes.
Yes.
Cool.
Of course.
Let's no, damn it. This app is really annoying. Yeah, so now I can share my screen. I assume you can see my screen.
Yes.
And you can see this weird curve. Whoop. So I will go back to the old project from last week and just go to CD React 12, the code. Oof. And I will zoom in. We have this. For simplicity, I will delete.
Jonas, before you delete them, can we just know which files are not essential?
I only keep index.js.
It's the only essential. Okay.
Yeah, and but you also need sort of to delete few things in index.js because it imports some things from other files. So
Yeah, I tried that, but I think it will be nice to know because I was trying error, and maybe it's good if you just let us know what we can erase.
yeah, I think index.js is a good candidate to keep. Make sense? Yeah, so we have the class app. I didn't write classes for a long time. And we have render. And render returns an h1. And we say hello. If we try to run this, we can say npm start. By the way, am I doing something wrong? Did I delete?
Are you in the right folder?
Oh, I need to go to first week. This is a good thing to remember, actually. So I will do something better. I will go to first week. Let's say code. Yeah, this is better.
Last question.
Yes.
Every time with React component that I render, I need to return something.
Yeah, because if the whole idea about a component is to display something. So if it doesn't render anything, why it's there? There is some valid use cases, but I would say it's like I don't know, like 99% of component should return something. Cool. So we have our component. So let's start by, as we said, talking about state. And the way we will think about state now is that, let's say we have a counter in our app. Okay? And this counter, if you have any questions, please raise and say, I don't understand this, because my talking doesn't make sense all the time. So let's say we have a counter, and what I mean by a counter is just some UI element, so like a div or a span or something, like a number, and a button to increment it and decrement it. So every time we click the button, we increment the counter. So you can think about it as a counter for how many bad habits you did or something. And you click the button and you will increase it by 1. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. And if you think about a counter, does it have a state? Does it need a state? Because until now, we didn't really, so a lot of components that we built, they didn't really have any state. Like the header, they only list things. But for example, does the counter need state? And if it does need state, why does it need state? If your question is yes, why does it need state?
I think it needs state because it's subject to change.
That's a good remark. What is subjected to change?
The value of the counter, because every time when I click the button, it should increase. So previously when it was 0, the state was in 0, and when it's increasing, it's changed to another other value. So which means it's changing. So definitely you need state. I think so. I'm not sure.
Makes sense. That's actually convincing. Any other thoughts?
I think because it is not doing it itself, we are pushing button, so we are changing the state.
Yeah, definitely yes. The button is causing an action to change. So that's yeah. So you are completely right, because we have this changing thing, and we have an action that causes it to change. So we need to keep track of what's happening. What's our current status? Are we closed? Are we open? Are we in 0? Are we in 1? Are we in 2? So we need state to hold that. Previously, we didn't have any state. And that was because our components, they were like showing something, displaying something, but there was no interaction to change how they looked like. So we didn't really have any state. We couldn't cause any change inside it. But now we have clearly something that can cause us or cause the component to change. So we need state for that. Before doing it, let's. I always try to sort of do a dummy UI about the thing. So let's do this. I will build a class called counter.
I wanted to ask something.
Yes.
If like it acts like what we do, whatever we do in HTML. It's just the different way of doing it, not writing HTML and doing things, right?
It's different, and we will see why it's different.
Yeah, and I just wanted to ask that we do same thing in HTML, right?
Yeah.
So while we are doing the same thing in HTML by clicking any button and doing the increment thing in HTML, we don't need to have the control over this state in HTML. So why do we need to control the state in this React?
Well, you need to control the state in HTML, because in HTML, if you have a counter in HTML,
yeah,
JavaScript, like plain HTML and JavaScript, you will still need to sort of like you need a way to know when you increment. You need a way to say what's the current number to increment it. So you need to store that current number. Some people store it inside the HTML, inside the DOM.
Yes.
Some people keep it in a separate JavaScript variable.
Yes.
The thing is that even now, just discussing it, we discovered that we can do it in so many ways and forms. And this causes a lot of troubles in terms of managing state, because this is a counter. Imagine if you have a list of users and each user has a first name and last name and age or something. Where are you going to put the object? In the HTML? That's not possible. You cannot put object in the HTML. So we need to keep it in a separate JavaScript object. And now we need to synchronize them. Every time the object changes, you need to detect that to apply it in the UI. And it will become so messy.
Yeah.
So React proposes this change and this unified model, this one way of how you can manage state. And everybody sort of respects it. And it will be one way of doing things, more than like all over the place.
Okay.
Maybe that doesn't make a lot of sense, because probably you didn't read a lot of like state code in all the jQuery or all like imperative DOM, HTML, JavaScript ways, but that's really messy. And we will see it in a bit, like an analogy, like how it's.
And when we are so many people working on the same project in a big organization, it is better to keep things in sync so that everybody follow the same rules.
Yeah,
I guess.
Definitely, yeah. I've worked on really large projects with like more than 10,000, like 15,000 components, and it's like hell if there is no one way of doing it.
Yeah.
Like
set of rules we should follow.
Exactly. So let's start. Thank you for that, and let's start by building a counter component. As we said, we don't want to put everything in one component. We want to split. So let's build a counter component, and we say extends react.component, and it has a render method. And the render, what does it return? Let's say it returns a div with, let's say an h1, maybe, and we say 5, and a button, increment. Does this make sense? Does it make sense? This
Yes.
HTML structure? Cool.
Yes.
App not, yeah, of course. App is not returning anything, so we need to return something. So let's return counter like this. Does this make sense?
Simplify. We are not adding anything, so how it will?
We are not doing anything. No, it doesn't work. Nothing works now. It is static HTML. There is no magic in React. You will see everything in React is done manually, so you will not see any magic. Don't worry.
Okay.
So a dummy thing like this would be always static like this. So this is a super simple UI. It's just a div with an h1 and a button. I think this makes sense. Yes. So
yes.
Let's start, for example, by introducing state. Or for example, before introducing state, let's say let here counter value, or let's say value equal 4 or 5. We put value here. Make sense? If I will increment, nothing change because it's a 5. Let's say I have here increment. It's a function. And what does it do? It says value equal value plus 1. Is this simple? Just increment and the value. I assume so.
Yes.
We're not calling it. It doesn't do anything. It's just there. So what do we want now? What we want is that we want to click on a button to do something. So we want an event listener.
Yes, on click. We do it on click.
Exactly. So we want an on-click event listener. Previously, you were doing like this: document.get element by ID, and after that, x add event listener, x equal, and you say x add.
Sorry, did we said that when it's a function, we should start it with a capital letter?
Every
Or I'm
React
confused.
component should start with a capital letter. React component.
Because, and function increment shouldn't be with
No, it's
capital?
just a normal function. It's not a React component. It's just a normal function.
Okay.
You can see here render is smaller letter. Render here is smaller letter. Get element by ID smaller letter. Increment component should be named with capital letter, capitalized. Yes, so you will do it this way. You say add event listener and click blah 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 blah. So in React is way simpler. In React, you just go here and you do it like the old way. You just say on click here.
Click and call the function, name function.
Yeah, you give it the function. So you say on click equal. So what's happening here is that you are passing a prop to the button, but the button component, we didn't define that. It's defined by React, like in H1, like the div. And we are passing on click. And the way you see like events are handled by on, smaller, and click. And you give it the function. This will translate into this. Let's say const btn equal document dot get element by ID, or let's say query selector. That's more accurate. And it will say btn dot add event listener, click increment. So this and this is the same. Do you agree? Do you see the point or no?
Yes.
Cool. So everybody agrees with that. That's nice. Let's delete this old code and do this. So what's happening now? Let's for example take a console.log into the into this and like say incrementing.
Can you please minimize the terminal window so that I can see all the code at the same time?
A second. Does this make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so it's this, and let's go to the screen now and we say increment. So we are calling the method, as you can see here. We are calling the method incrementing. And we are changing the value. But the value is not shown here. It's not updated. Can you sort of give us a hint why? Like, what's the problem here? No? Nobody can guess?
Yeah, global scope. I mean, the scope is not.
With auto change mbot HTML, in HTML. So
Maybe can I guess?
You are
No,
right.
Charles?
You're right. He said something really important. He said we want to change it in the HTML, and that's not happening here.
Yeah, we should do render once again.
Yeah, exactly. That's also so we should change it in the HTML by rendering once again. That's good thoughts. Let's keep them aside and continue. Shoot out more thoughts.
Yeah, maybe I can guess based on okay. So in line, okay. So the value that's given in line 15 is even though it's declared globally, it's used inside a component. So initially, when it is 5, it just remains as 5.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But even as I say this, I'm still confused because the value is global and why it's not changing.
Yeah, let's talk about that. And you already sort of said the answers, a few of you. So let's say we have let's go with the life cycle of the of what's happening here. So the first line that runs is this one. It will run the app component. We will run the app component, we will run the render method, and it will return a counter. The counter will return this one. It will return a div with an h1 button. And this is what we see here. Let me just console. Yeah, this is what we see here. We see a div with an h1 and a button. Okay, that's done. Now we click the button. We click the button. When we click the button, we call this function. It will say console.log incrementing. It will increment the value 5, and that's it. That's it. React doesn't know that the value changed. And the way you should think about that is that imagine you have let a equal 5. Let b equal a times 2. If we change a to 0, does b change?
No.
No, b doesn't change.
No.
B was always 10. Why? Because b, when we run this line, b sort of, this was like, a was changed to be 5. This is what happened. We replaced a by 5. Means that b doesn't observe a. B is not waiting for a to change. And I don't know if you got this example. I assume so. It's simple. If you have any question, you can stop me. But what I was trying to emphasize here is that when you sort of update something, you don't expect the variable that used it before to be updated. So when we change the value here 5, React doesn't know that the value changed. How can React know that value changed? React is, or counter component, is the same as the b variable. A changed, okay, what I'm gonna do? I don't have any way to wait for a to change or like see if a changes. Same thing with value. Value can change a lot of times, but React still doesn't know. The only way sort of to tell React that that value changed is by re-rendering the component. And you already said that before. We need to re-render this component. What does it mean? It means we run this component, it will give us this view 5 increment. We increment the value +1. We rerun it again. When we rerun it again, value, it will take the new value. And that's like doing this. B is up. Yeah, we said A5, B, A equals 0. Now, if we see B B is 10. The only way to update B is to run this again. So now B, so what does it mean? That if A changed, B doesn't really change. We are responsible for going to change B because we know, we are the programmers. We know that A changed because we did some lines of code. So we need to do that. And the same way here, when we change the value, yes?
So we need to write the function the counter.
What?
We need to write the counter.
I cannot hear you.
Now.
Yeah, just get closer to the mic.
Yeah, it's okay. Now, so you mean we need to write the function for a counter inside the class? That's what you mean?
We will do that, but still, we need to use the concept of state from React. But that's right. That's going toward the solution.
Okay.
So yeah.
I have few questions, Yunus. I have two questions. First one is when what I want to ask was, okay, so in line 4, when you declare the value as 5,
Yeah.
so when that is not going to impact in any ways, then why have you declared it there?
Because that's the natural approach when you do programming, is to declare variables outside so you can change them.
Okay, fine. Yeah,
That's
okay.
why it's just the most natural way.
Okay. And the next question was, so when I try to write this whole setup in HTML, then I think this increment will work, right? There is, it does work or it doesn't work?
It doesn't work because you still need to update the DOM, the HTML, with the new value.
Okay. Yeah.
Updating a variable inside JavaScript doesn't mean that that variable will be synced into the HTML.
Yeah. Okay.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Can we just think of it as, I know it's like making it very simple, but as a kind of refreshing the page?
It is refreshing. It's like re-rendering, refreshing the page.
Like, yeah, exactly. You just have to restart something just to see it really work. So
exactly.
that's how
the same way we redid the assignment of A or B, we need to refresh. So
well, exactly. Yeah, that's what I meant.
yes. So
but we are not refreshing the browser, right? We are just refreshing
we will not refresh. That was just an example.
No, that was a metaphor only.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I didn't mean it literally.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's not something new, because even if we were doing this in the old-fashioned way, we would still need to say that get this element from the DOM and then change the text value of this H1, right?
You are, you are absolutely right. The difference is that fundamentally it's the same, but how we will solve it with React, that's the different part. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we don't like the button that you said that we don't need to grab this element from the DOM and do this.
Exactly.
The things we have central way to do this. It should be the same here.
Precisely. So let's start by doing that. And the way we do it is that, so remember we have a constructor, and in the constructor we call super. So we get props here. This is please, this is something to keep in mind. This should be the boilerplate of a constructor. It should be like this always, because you need to call the parent class. And here you can do whatever you want.
Okay.
Alternatively, we can also just declare it here. So we can say state equal. State is always an object. State is not a number. State is not an array. State is always an object. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we can name it anything. Use state or
no. It needs to be named state. The same way render needs to be named render. This needs to be named state.
Okay.
Yeah. So this needs to be named state. It's something that React measures. So,
but I think the other way you wrote it is as we have it in the material we study.
You want it that way?
It's how it is in the material. So maybe.
I can also.
It's good for reference.
So let's guys do it both ways to see the difference. So we will have constructor, props, super, props. Here we start our real code. We say this.state equal empty object. This is the only difference. The same way you say this, you just need to prefix it with a this dot and put it here. So it's kind of the same, honestly. There's no difference. Make sense?
Yes.
So should we stick with this approach of the constructor? Let's do that then. Yes. So inside, think about your state as it's a bag. You can put so many things inside it because it's an object. What we want now is a value, and the value start maybe by 0. Make sense? So we start by 0. Now here, we need to display that value. The way we access state is literally the same. We say this.state. And because it's an object, we say dot what? Dot value. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Cool. And if we see here, we have a 0. Why we have a 0? Because state is 0. If we can put 7 here, it's a 7. So, to introduce state in a React class component, you need to first create a constructor, say this.state and assign it to an object and put whatever you want inside it. Here we need value. We could put more things like messages, lists, whatever we want. But here we only need the value, which is a number. And you can access it by saying this.state, which is this object. And because it's an object, we can say .value. If we name this value 5, we say value 5. Sorry. Value 5. If we name this
Number.
current, or number, current value, we name this current value. It's just an object, like props. We get the key from it.
So can we see a state as you mentioned, as a kind of bag that whatever element that we like to be constantly observed by the HTML?
I didn't get your question.
Can we see the state as a bag that we put whatever object that we want to be observed constantly? We will put that in that state bag.
Exactly.
So those things that is not supposed to be changed, we are not supposed to hold those things in state bag. But those that we want to be dynamic, we will put them.
Exactly. For example, if you have like a
header or the title of the page, you wouldn't put that
exactly.
here.
That's and until you want the user to edit the title of the page, just keep it in a variable, static variable.
Okay, thank you.
That is exactly right. We should only put the things that impact the render, that change the render. Even if the things changes, but they don't change the render, we don't put them in. So if, for example, you increment the variable and you don't want it to show in the UI, there is no need to put it in state. State is really used for the stuff that actually updates the UIs and cause a re-render.
Good, thank you.
Yes, so, yes.
I have just a confusion.
Yeah.
Can we look at the code? When I ask you about the functions and the variables, which of all this, maybe it's a stupid question, but I'm confused with JavaScript and JSX. What is JavaScript in this code?
What can you just repeat your question again? I didn't get it. I didn't get exactly the question.
Looking at the code.
Yeah.
For example, what is this is all JavaScript?
Yeah.
The function, the value equal, the function is JavaScript.
This only this part. I don't know if we can do multiple selection. Yeah, I would select only this part. This part is not JavaScript. Everything else is just valid JavaScript and you can run it in a browser or anywhere. Only this HTML that is embedded inside JavaScript, it's an extension of React.
Perfect.
Anything else, this, state, counter, extend React component, value, increment, console.log, import React, that's just normal JavaScript. Once you start like putting some HTML inside the JavaScript, that's what React or JSX starts showing itself.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. So we still have increment and nothing happens. Why? Because we need to tell React that we are incrementing. And now we are incrementing this. So what we should do is, and someone already said it, that we need to put the increment here. So increment, we put it as a method. And I don't know if you're familiar with this sort of way. This is the same way as function. This and this are the same. Or this, and this are the same. Only here we use an arrow function instead of a normal function. They're the same. So instead of calling increment, we call this dot increment. This increment, it's still empty. So here we will move this line into here, and we need to update the value inside state as a comment. Does this make sense? Okay. So once the user clicks the button, we call this dot increment. This is this dot increment.
And you delete the first function or no? We need to delete the first function.
Yeah, we can delete it. Like it's
yeah. So we don't need it. Yeah.
No, like forget about it. It's value and stuff there. We're not using them anymore. You can see here.
Okay.
So we need a way now to tell React and say, let me just put my trackpad in charging. It's complaining. Trackpad, yeah. Yeah. So we need to tell, well, damn it. We need to tell React about that we want to update the state. Because if you think about it, maybe you will do this dot state dot value equal this dot state dot value plus 1. Will you do this? I think this is the most natural way that comes to your mind.
No, because it's a state, it's an object.
Yeah, we are updating the object here, this dot state dot value.
Yeah, maybe we can.
So we can do this.
We can do it. Yeah, like that.
Do you think this is right? Well, I can say to you, it's not right. React doesn't allow you to modify the state directly. It's not allowed. The only time where it's allowed is on the constructor. When you initialize the component, you are allowed to assign something to the state because it's the first time. But after that, any change to the state needs to be done through something called setState. So there is this dot setState. So this dot setState is a function. Where it's coming from, it's because we are extending React component. So we have access to this dot state. So does it make sense where this state is available? Why it's available? It's because it's coming from React component. We are extending it. If you go to the source code of React component, there's a set state. We are inheriting it. We are extending it because of the extends keyword. Set state takes a new object. And that new object, you pass the value to it. So you will say value, because it's the same object. You say value is current value plus 1. Now if we come here and we say increment, it works. It is not magic, it's manual work. Does this make sense? Seriously, does it make sense?
It makes sense when you are writing it.
Yes, it is.
It should be difficult. Come on.
I'm trying to process.
It's a lot of roaming around with variables, and not variables, with things.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you say we use this this set state from React component.
Yeah.
Where I can see what I can get from React component.
Oh, yeah, you can go to something called React documentation.
Yes, I've been into it, but because there is a lot of things. There was one that was for setting up the things and then erase it, and
We can also say React API. Yeah. I think set state is not part of this. Yeah. I think they don't try to introduce it in terms of like this is all what you can access. They try to show you like which thing gives you which capability. If that makes sense.
if I need to make a function, how will you Google it? Because we need to learn how to search the information.
I would say going through, as we said before, going through the main concepts of React. This one, as we said in the thinking in React, especially thinking in React, that gives you all the API that you need for React. After that, you just Google it. For example, I can say update state React, and that will give me to state and lifecycle, and I can find it here. So you learn the basic API, and after that, just Google it the same way you Google it, like anytime.
Do you have like a list of, I don't know, 5 APIs that you use a lot?
Yeah,
like
there are really few.
8?
There are really few. There is not a lot. There is like maximum 5 or 6.
What are the ones you use the most?
We will see as we are getting introduced. So we barely introduced one now. So we will see when we introduce one. But does this make sense? That we are accessing the state?
Yeah, to some extent, yes.
Yes, let me introduce you to...
One question.
Yes.
Did we really need it to store the data in current value before we manipulate that, or could we?
No. You can do this. You can do this easily. You can easily do this.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just so it's clear. What the fuck? So it's clear.
Okay. Thank you.
If I want to decrement, I will do it like this, -1. And now I will be going minus. So if we summarize it, this is how actually every possible web application, or like not web application, every possible app, from a desktop to an ATM to a mobile, this is the basic. We have a piece of UI that shows some state, shows something, there's something inside it, and we listen for some actions. Once this action happens, when the user clicks, type, touch something, we run some code that updates the state, and that will cause a re-render and shows a new version of the UI. This is how anything works. If you are working with mobile pay, you type the number. As you are typing the number, the UI is changing and showing you the number. When you say next, it takes you to the other UI, because there is a piece of state that it's saying, are you in the first UI, in the second UI? It shows you a list of users. You can add to them, you can delete to them based on user actions. This is how every possible action. In Messenger, you send messages by typing something and after that clicking the button, and that will update the state by having an array of messages and adding one message to the array. This is basically how every app works. There is some state with some in some UI, we do some actions, we update that state, and that reflects in the UI. Does that make sense? Cool. So we will go for an exercise. If you don't have any questions.
I'm just curious, can anyone at this point guess why the library is called React?
Because it's reactive to the user?
Kind of, yes, also to the user, but also to what we just did in this exercise, right? The state. Can you grasp that concept that the UI is reacting to the changes in the state?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
so that's where React came from. The name React came from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Pretty much of it.
Yeah. So does it make sense? We should go for an exercise now.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
you just told me that we are re-rendering for the value to be updated. So where is this re-rendering actually happening? From line 13 to 16? That's what you mean by re-rendering?
So if we do this, no re-rendering will happen.
Okay.
So when you call this dot set state, you call it with the new value. If, for example, we say current value here, it will not increment, it will not update.
Okay.
When we change the state, so going back in the basics, the way to tell React to re-render and show new UI is by calling this dot set state and providing it with the new value. This
Okay.
is what's causing this is how we tell React that there is a change and please react. This is what, like, sort of the name, please react.
Okay.
We say to react by calling set state. That's the key.
Okay, yeah.
So without a set state, nothing will change, even if we've changed this dot say dot value millions of times.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Cool. So let's go for the exercise. I will pass this code in Slack. Class 12. And the exercise will be this. I am pasting it in the class 12. Can you see it? It's basically you will. So now we have a button that increments. You will add two more buttons. One button to decrement. So you click it, it will go down. One more button to reset. What does it mean? If you click, you click that reset button, it will make it 0. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
So the code is in class 12 channel. Go ahead and do it. You have some 15, 20 minute-ish to do it. I will stop sharing my screen because you have the code. Stop sharing.
I have a question.
Yes.
So the increment is a method inside the class, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's a method. I'm going for 2 minutes, just bringing a cup of coffee. So.
Is everything going well with the exercise so far?
Yeah.
Yes, it's simple.
Yeah, that was simple. That's good.
All right, nice.
So far, so good.
Ooh, cool.
Fernando, can you check my code? I sent it to the Slack. Can you check it? It's okay or not? Or
Yeah, I'll take a look.
Mohammed?
yes, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes.
But I just have a question. Why in the reset function you put const current value equals 0?
Because when I want to when I want to press the zero after reset, so I want to tell this bottom the current value you will send it to the screen. It's just zero. That's what I mean.
Yeah, but I thought that the current value, like the current value, it's gonna be whatever it is happening.
Yeah, but
That's what that's what I understood. And then in the second line, in this state, this set state value, and then I put it to 0. But the current value should be whatever is happening in the browser, right? Or did I get it wrong?
I think you have a valid
Excuse
question.
me.
It's just regarding Mohammed code. Let's just wrap that. I think that's it's a valid question because in the reset function, Mohammed created a new constant. And in this case, you could create a constant if you want to, and if you think that will make your code more meaningful to someone. But I agree that creating a constant called current value doesn't add anything like of value for someone who is reading the code. So you could instead just pass the value directly.
Value is zero. So you mean just delete the line 18 and put the value 0 inside the
set state.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's okay.
Sorry, I interrupt someone. You can.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
No, I just wanted to say that for me, it would be more meaningful to call it initial value rather than current value. In the last, in the last line, when we actually set it to 0, we don't set it to current value. What is more meaningful is the initial value. So that makes more sense to me. That's all I wanted to say.
Yes, another way of doing that, you could define an external const, some const outside of the component. Let's say that you want to define like just a different initial value every time you use in the component. And then you can have this constant either inside, but it cannot be in the state because you want that value to be always the same. So you can define like an external constant called like initial value, and then you just use that to reset. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
And now that you raised that question, you could think like the counter, the component itself, it almost always will be 0, the initial value. But you could also have, if you remember from the previous class, you could also have a prop called initial value, and that will define from each which number the component will start counting from.
Can you say that again, please?
You could also, if you care about what's the initial value of the counter, let's say that you don't want the counter to have the initial value of 0, you could also have a prop which is passed to counter, which defines that initial value. But I mean, that's not necessary for this exercise. I'm just extending that since you raised that question.
So that prop, the value of that props is going to be always the value that I set.
Sorry, can you say that again?
So the value of props is always going to be the value that I set. That's not going to change, right? That's going to be the same. It's going to be like the default value.
If you pass a value as a prop, not necessarily. It depends, because then you have the parent component, and that parent component can change that value. You cannot change inside the component which is receiving the prop, but the parent can change that.
It's not that we are doing at the beginning of the constructor when we say support props this state equals value 0. That's when we are setting up our value.
You're setting your state the first time, right? So you can definitely set your state based on the props. So if you receive, let's say, a prop initial value, as we say, you can then define your counter to start with that initial value from the props.
Okay.
Yeah, I can write some code here so you can understand that better.
Yeah.
But I thought the props shouldn't be something we want to change, right?
No, I'm not saying that you're going to change the props. I'm going to show the code so maybe you can understand better.
Thanks. How is everyone doing with the exercise?
It's I don't think it's very difficult, but we got the we understood what state means, so that's important, right? The exercise was not very difficult, at least for me.
I can't declare the reset function correctly.
Can I ask a question? Fernando?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, of course.
What if we wanted to pass some arguments to these functions, reset, decrement, or increment? Would it be just normally making parentheses next to this dot increment and then pass the objects to the function?
Yeah, if you want to pass arguments, that should be all you need. But you just need to be careful how you define that inside your onClick. We can show you an example later, I guess, with Jonas.
Yeah. Because I was thinking that maybe one way would be to just have one function and then pass an argument that if the argument is, for example, plus, then it increment, and then if it is minus, then it decrement that, and then if it is reset, then it just resets. I mean, having all these things in one function.
You could, but again,
I know that it's not practical, but I just wanted to. Through this question, I got this question that how we can pass the arguments to the function.
Yeah, you can definitely do that. It's not necessary for this component you're making right now. And I personally think that having different functions, it's even better to understand the code because you.
Yeah, definitely.
I agree. Huh?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I just wanted. Yeah.
Yeah, but
to address how this question
is just
came
not
to my mind.
If everyone have finished the exercise, I think we can proceed. Maybe.
Did everyone finish it?
I don't know. Maybe we can ask.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying. Did you all finish the exercise?
Yeah, I guess we can.
Yeah.
Does anybody haven't finished?
Can you, if somebody didn't finish it, can you say I didn't?
I didn't finish the reset function. It's not working well. But the increment and decrement, it's working perfectly.
Yeah, but let's try to solve it together. Okay.
Yes.
Let's do it. So we are back in the code.
Okay, so John said that he didn't finish.
Yeah, but I think it's good timing. So if somebody didn't finish,
okay, yeah.
you can follow up with us on the screen. Yes, so we have increment button. What we need now is decrement button, and it's literally the same. I can like copy this and duplicate it. So I will say do this decrement. Sorry. Okay, and we will say this dot set state value equal this dot state dot value -1. Okay. Now we need to call this button or this method on a button. So I will create something here. I say this the decrement, and I would say decrement. I will go here. I have increment. I have decrement. Make sense? Is this right?
Yep.
Cool. Let's do a bit of logic, just in addition to this before going to the reset. Let's say that once you hit 0, you are not allowed to decrement. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So let's say if, so in the decrement, we would say in f dot state dot value, we put this in const value or current value equal this. Let's say if current value is less or equal 0, or we can say if it's equal 0. We say alert, you can't decrement. And we say return. Does this make sense? If we run it, increment, decrement, you can decrement. Does this make sense?
Yeah. Yunus, I have a question here.
Yeah.
Line 13, the increment method and decrement method that we have written, it's a method, but I'm not familiar with this syntax of the method. What does it mean? I mean, I can just write like increment, open and close brace, and open the flower brackets.
The way you should think about it is like, so you can say const, you can say, for example, state, as we say before, equal this. Okay?
Yeah.
So it's putting an arrow function like this. So literally, we are assigning an arrow function to a class property, to an instance property. So we are saying, for example, like test equal. The only difference between it and the outside world or outside the class is that this can work. You just need a const here or a let or something, and it works here because it's a class. So we don't need to prefix it with a constant something. The same way you see we are defining the render. Just think that we can do this.
But line 16 should also work like this, right? Increment, open and close brackets, and open and close curly brackets, like without the arrow.
You mean like this?
That's how we declare a function inside the class, right? Am I right or wrong? I don't know. It's just basics.
You can do with this, and you can do it with the arrow function. Anything you can do with the function, you can do it with an arrow function. Remember that.
Okay.
You can do it this way.
Yeah.
And also do it this way. Think about it that this, it's equal to an arrow function. Instead of a named function, you are using an anonymous arrow function.
But why?
So there's two things. The first thing is that arrow functions, they are like generally better at something called binding. So if we, I don't know if you are familiar with the concept of binding, like this. Like this.
Well, why I asked this question, maybe if I explain that, maybe you can know why I'm asking this. Because what I thought, at least in JavaScript, what I thought, like why we are writing arrow function is because just to make the code like look super cool.
That is not true. That's the wrong way of teaching arrow functions.
So why are we writing arrow functions then?
Arrow functions, they were added to JavaScript for a completely different reason than functions. And so a lot of people misuse this and say it's a cooler. No, it's not cooler. They don't replace all functions. It's a completely different use case. 90% they are similar, but there's a 10% that makes it a huge difference. The huge difference is when you have a this inside.
Okay.
Can we just finish this and I go explain it?
Yeah, definitely.
But you raised a good issue. I try to not discuss it, but it's an important issue. Let's people who were like in this discussion, let's just backtrack and go back to our example. But we will discuss it after finishing this. So is this clear, the increment and decrement? Is it?
Should we add an else statement, or we can leave it just like that?
What?
Should we add an else statement in line 24, or we just leave it like that?
No, because I'm saying here return. So if it's true, it will return. If it's not true, it will just jump to this line. So we can also do an else. I don't like else statements, but I have opinions. Yeah, we can do it this way. So it's just a style of code, I would say. Let's add a reset. So same reset will do this. This dot state reset value, value 0. It will reset it to 0. And we will add a button. We say reset, and we have on click this dot reset. We come here, increment, decrement, reset 0. Decrement doesn't work. Does this make sense? For everyone?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, but what if I want to start it from some number, not 0?
Good catch. Let's do that. Let's say maybe from outside, we want to have the component app configured. Let's use something called initial value. Okay?
That's what Fernando sent, right?
I'm not familiar with that.
Yes, but I don't understand how can I use in this state.
So I can say initial value 0. And here, instead of saying reset, I will say this dot props dot what? Initial value.
Initial value, yeah.
Initial value.
If I would pass 5 here, and also yes, here we don't initialize it with 0, but we initialize it with this dot props dot initial value, and it will start with 5. If we'll make this,
that's exactly what I wanted. Haha.
If we make this 7, we have this.
Yes, this is exactly the discussion we had on Slack. So that's perfect example.
Nice, cool. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
So now
Yes.
increment, decrement, reset
Yeah.
to 7. Increment, reset to 7, decrement, reset to 7. Is it right?
Yeah. Because
Yes.
I think the point is just to make it as flexible as possible, right?
Exactly.
So we need to have the initial value.
Yeah.
We don't really want to set it just to 0. We just want to be able to set it to whatever we want. And
Right.
that was my point with the initial value I mentioned previously.
You are completely right.
This is so cool.
yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, components should sort of be flexible. Let's do something crazy. Let's do this. Let's render multiple counters. One starts from 1, one starts from 7. It is completely right, and we can do that with React. That's the awesome thing, that once you build the component, you can reuse it in however you want. So increment, 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 increment here, decrement, decrement, reset, increment. So these two components now, they are like different than each other. They are like two, it's like having a blueprint for a car and building the car. So a component like a counter, it's a blueprint for the car. Like it's like how the car should look like. Once we mention it in the JSX, we build that car. So we have two different independent cars now, or two different independent counters. Each one of them is separate. It has its own state, it has its own props, it has different things. I think this is pretty awesome that we can do that sort of without really thinking about like which, if we're doing that with like normal HTML, we need to think a lot about doing it.
Yeah, that I was thinking that why we are having so much things for just making one, one calculation or one module. Now I understand by just copy and pasting one counter module, we can just copy the whole module like so many times, twice,
Precisely.
thrice.
Precisely. Literally, that is true. That is true. And I can like, if you think about like, well, I don't know, like if you work for a company that it's like big, and it has like so many products. For example, I'm working for Danske Bank now, and they have like so many products, like mobile pay, like online banking, mobile banking, so many, and they are all built with React. So one team can build a component, and all the other teams, they can use it. That's like crazy. Like if you think about it, like there is like so many components that everybody can use. It. Like there's like 2,000 developers or something. They are all using the same components. That is like really the power of React, that somebody can just pick a component and put it in his project. It doesn't need to be web or something. They can just use a project. You don't need to be working on the same project even. And Facebook and so many companies like that, they do the same. They build one component and the whole organization or the whole company uses it. So imagine like somebody builds a component in half an hour, and it will save like hours and hours and hours, like thousands of hours of development, just because that one is used.
So when these companies like big companies like Facebook and others, they build a component like that. So do they provide other developers that function free of cost, or just other developers, they just copy it and then they post it on some?
Yeah, it's like React. They put it on NPM, so you can download it from NPM. So NPM
Yeah, it is free. It is free for everyone.
Not for everyone. It depends. There is some things are free, some things aren't. So not everything is free. It's a privilege. I will explain before going for a break. I will try to explain what we discussed before about binding. Yes, so I will remove a counter from here. So let's say I will have increment and normal function. Okay, I will say increment. That doesn't work. That will blow up. That's pretty weird. And it's saying cannot reach state of undefined. Means this it means this dot state, this line 15, it's mentioning line 15. This dot state. So state cannot read properly state of the undefined. So it's saying that this is undefined because it cannot read state on undefined. So this is undefined. Why this is undefined? It's because functions, like normal functions, or let's just go to JSPin. Let's just go to JSPin for a second. HTML, JavaScript, console, output. let's say console.clear. No, yeah. So let's say console.clear. If we have an object, const object, with the name Yunus, and let's say hi, it's a function. Let's say console.log, hello. And we can say, let's just do a plus, stupid, but this dot name. If we say object, I did something stupid. Object dot say hi. What does it print? Can someone guess?
Nothing, because
Hello, Yunus.
it has to be called, right?
Yes.
Hi, Yunus.
Hello, Yunus.
Hello,
Yunus, yeah.
Hello, Yunus, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Hello, Yunus. If we do this,
Oh, yeah.
if we have a button, let's say I will stick in a button in the HTML. Or no, I think I can go simpler. I can go simpler and say, let's say I will do a set timeout. After 1 second, do say hi. So I'm not doing this, I'm doing this because I want to pass a function. Set timeout takes a function, not a function call. We give it a function without calling it. Set timeout will call the function. If I will run this, what's gonna happen?
It's going to
It will give
display
a
your name every minute.
What?
It's going to display your name every minute. Maybe hello Yunus every
No,
minute.
this is a set timeout, so it only does it once.
Just one.
Ah, okay.
And it's a 1 second, not 1 minute. It's 1000.
Yeah,
1 second.
yeah.
After 1 second, come the
It will give an error, I think,
If somebody says it's an error, he should say why. If somebody says
because it needs to be a function.
this is a function.
Yeah, it will write you.
Yeah. So if we will run, we say hello JSBin output, which is super weird stuff.
Hello.
Yeah. If we say this in our old example, it's an object. We can do it this way just to get the object. So hello with an object that, so this refers to the object. But when we do it like this, we get a huge object, which is the window. I'm wondering if I use strict, what will happen? Use strict.
It is returning everything because this refers to the whole thing inside this function.
No, this refers to the window, to the global context. Why it's that? It's because JavaScript functions. So JavaScript functions, when you say object.sayHi and you call it, the this inside this function is dictated by how you call the function. If you say object.sayHi means you are calling this function on an object, on the context of this object. So the this will refer to this object. But if you instead do kind of x, const x object.sayHi, or like we did with the set timeout. sorry, and you say X, it will start referring to the global context, to the window. Why? Because we are not doing object dot anymore. Is that confusing or?
Yes, it's confusing.
It's really
Yes.
confusing, but I would like to say that in the homework,
is.
one of the steps is to read about this, right? We have
Exactly.
three links for actually to read about this finding in JavaScript, because this is something we've been avoiding since the previous modules, and now it's when it's really hidden in. So I think it's going to be confusing. I'm not expecting it to understand it right now.
Yeah, and I always thought that this refers to all the things inside that particular function. I mean,
Not always. That's the thing. It's not always.
so how it is different? I mean, in what conditions?
It's based on how you call it. If you call it like this, it's because you are calling it on object. So it's object dot say hi. But if you assign it to a variable, let's say func2, now the way you are calling it is not like object dot func2. So you are calling it free. Now this will not refer. The gist of it is that functions in JavaScript, so how the this behaves inside function in JavaScript is that based on how you call it, not how you define it. Based on how you call the function, the this will behave differently. If you call it like this in a context of an object, the this will be that object. If you call it freely like this, which is the same thing when you do set timeout. Because if you think about set timeout, if we create a function called the function run, okay, and this function take a callback and just runs it. If we backtrack into this, if I would say run object.sayHi, what will happen? What does this function do? It takes a function and runs it. Make sense?
What about dot say hi?
Yeah, so when we run object.sayHi, callback inside this function, what it's referring to now?
Callback.
Yeah, callback, what it's referring to.
But it's still referring to object that say hello. Doesn't that mean that object say hello will be run in the object environment?
Yes, so callback is referring to object.sayHi when we run it. Because we are running it differently than this one, if you see it like this, then this here would not refer to object anymore.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Does it make sense?
Not actually.
This is gonna take time to digest.
Yeah. But please go and read about it. I think it's mentioned, as you said, one of the homeworks or preparations or something to read about this.
It's the homework for this week. That's why I know we shouldn't understand it exactly right now, because we are starting to grab the concept.
Exactly. So please go and read about it. It's really important. And there is materials to read about it for this homework. I just wanted to give you an idea. So if you can just remember what I say, because it will make sense after you go and read the materials for the homework. Functions inside JavaScript, their context, what I mean by their context is the this inside them. The this inside them is dictated by how you call the function, not by how you define it. So every time you call the function differently, the this will behave differently. Except arrow functions. Arrow functions, they have a static this. It doesn't change. Keep this in your mind. It doesn't make sense now. It's your responsibility to go and read about it. It's something that needs to you need to do a lot of exercises about it. It's the same way with for loops and things. You just
Is that the reason why we should use arrow functions? instead of these functions?
Because with arrow functions, as I just said it now, with functions, the this changes basically on how you call the function. The this changes based on how you call the function. With arrow functions, the this is static. It doesn't change based on how you call a function.
So is that good? I mean, because it doesn't change. So how?
That's good in our case here. Because we want the this here to be static, to always refer to the counter. Because if we console log, here, instead of increment, if we console log this, and we say increment, it's undefined. This is undefined. Why? Because it's changing. Why it's changing? Because the button is calling it. To make sure that it doesn't change, even when the button calls it, we make it an arrow function. And an arrow function has a static binding. It means this will be always static. It doesn't change like the normal function.
So my question is, with function with arrow and function without arrow, both have their own benefits. So we need to learn both of them. Like we cannot skip. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to learn both, of course, and you need to also learn about the
difference between
this binding. It is not sort of a basic. It's not a basic like thing that you need to understand to do JavaScript, but it's definitely something that it will save you time. If you, for example, see an error like the red screen that we just saw now, if you knew about binding and stuff, you will be able to easily catch it. And also, it's a famous question for interviews. It happens a lot. I've been asked a lot of times about it. So please, you have some materials, just go and read about it.
Yunus, I have a question.
Yeah.
I somehow understood that when we declare a function, we have a lot of ways to declare a function, right?
Yeah.
Right. So So when we declare a function, when we write arrow function, it's just that we remove the name function and we put arrow instead of that. That's how I got it somehow.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. I got some basic question. What is the difference between method and a function?
A function is something that is not attached or defined inside an object or a class.
Okay.
It's a normal function. A method is a function that is defined in the context or a scope of an object or a class.
Okay, because with that previous understanding, because here in line 13 it doesn't have the keyword function and we are already using an arrow, so that's where I got confused.
Yes, because that's how you declare it inside the class. You don't need function test.
Okay.
You just do this. The same way you see the render and the constructor.
So I didn't know this before. I don't know. Maybe I missed it.
Excuse me?
You remember, Suhati, we had do it in JavaScript 3 when we get the constructor and the class. You remember that the method we use it when we use a constructor. You remember that?
But I don't remember it. I don't know. Maybe
But please, if always remember to brush up your skills and knowledge again, because there's so many things. For example, classes, you didn't use them extensively in all the classes. So please go, if you are missing point, just take a half an hour or 20 minutes and just write 2-3 classes, just so you remember it again, because that's the thing about the React class. The React class sort of groups everything in one place.
Yeah.
That's one of the things. So please go, and there's so many materials in the homework and in the preparation.
Yeah, sure.
To sort of kill that. Do you have any more questions before going for a break? I will get that as a no, and let's go for a break. Okay?
Okay.
Yay.
Okay.
All right. See you.
See you in...
So should we be back in 2:30?
No. 2:40?
When should we be back?
40? So 30 minutes?
Yunus, you're muted.
Sorry,
Yunus.
2:40.
240. Okay.
2:30. Okay.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.